The chain on my wrist cracks in the middle of the duel, and the entire arena goes dead silent. Because for 1 second, everyone sees the color of my mana. Black. Not gray, not shadow gray, black like the space between stars, and 3,000 students just watched it leak out of my palm like smoke from a wound that was never supposed to open. Cassian Varel freezes mid-swing. His golden blade is an inch from my throat, and he doesn't move it any closer. He doesn't move it away either. He just stares at my hand like it's a snake. "That's not possible," he says. "It is. It's been possible my whole life. I just spent 6 years making sure nobody found out. Here's the part that should scare you. This isn't even the worst thing that happens today. By tonight, the woman who raised me will be in chains. The Academy will call me a monster on live projection to the entire kingdom, and I will still walk into that arena a second time, on purpose." But let's back up, because none of this makes sense yet. And it shouldn't. My name is Ronan Draeger, and I was born with the one thing this kingdom fears more than war. Dark affinity. The kind they burned villages for 60 years ago during the Ashfall betrayal. The kind that gets a newborn taken from its parents on the spot. I should have died as an infant. I didn't because a woman named Mira Draeger stole me out of a Concord processing wagon and raised me as her little brother in a town too small to have a name worth remembering. She gave me a bracelet that night. Silver, thin, ugly. She called it a chain ward. It doesn't just hide dark mana, it strangles it. Locks it down to a whisper so faint that any inspector's spell reads me as ordinary. Harmless. Human. For 13 years, that lie worked perfectly. That silence didn't happen on its own. Starting the year I turned 9, Mira dragged me down into the tunnels under the blacksmith shop 3 nights a week and taught me to fight like my life depended on it. Because it did. She had an old grimoire, spine cracked, pages burned at the edges, full of techniques she called a different kind of night's work. She never told me where she got it. Every time I asked, she'd just say, "Some debts get paid quietly," and change the subject. I learned umbral severance in that tunnel before I learned how to properly hold a training sword. I learned void step before I learned my multiplication tables. Mira drilled me until my hands bled, then bandaged them herself, because a physician asking questions about training wounds was a risk we couldn't afford. I never once asked her why a seamstress from a town with no name knew forbidden Dark Mage night techniques well enough to teach them. Some part of me always knew the answer wouldn't be simple, and I wasn't ready for it. 6 years later, I still wasn't. Then I got into Aldermoor Academy of Knighthood and Sorcery on a combat scholarship, because apparently even a suppressed, choked-down sliver of my real power still hits harder than most nobles' entire reserve. Funny, right? The weakest version of me was still enough to humiliate half the enrollment exam. That's where the second lie started. Everyone at Aldermoor assumed I was just a talented commoner, a nobody who got lucky. I let them believe it because the alternative was execution. Cassian Varel didn't like that a nobody outscored him. Cassian Varel has never liked anything that wasn't about Cassian Varel. He's the golden knight everyone worships here, first bloodline of House Varel, the kind of guy who gets applause for breathing. Alara Sunvane, the top light mage in our year, used to stand next to him at every ceremony like they were a matched set the Academy printed on a recruitment poster. There's a kid in our year named Ren Talsley. Low-born like me, decent with a spear, terrible at hiding how nervous nobility makes him. 3 months into first term, Cassian humiliated him in the dining hall over a chipped practice blade, made him kneel and apologize to it in front of 200 students, like the sword had feelings. Ren dropped 2 ranks the following term and never fully came back from it. Nobody stepped in that day. Not the instructors, not the other scholarship students, not me. I told myself it wasn't my fight. I told myself a lot of things that year, and most of them boiled down to the same rule. Stay invisible, because visible gets you noticed, and noticed gets you dead. I watched Cassian do that to people who couldn't fight back, and I kept my head down anyway. That's the part of this story I'm not proud of. I want to tell you Alara is the reason I kept showing up to class. That would be a nicer story. The truth is, I kept showing up because Mira sold her own wedding ring to pay my tuition deposit, and I was not about to waste that. Every training match, I dialed myself down, lost on purpose, just enough to stay unremarkable. Ranked 11th instead of 1st, blended in. 3 weeks before the binding rite, Alara catches me right after I lose a match against a 3rd-ranked noble I could have finished in 4 seconds. She corners me in the courtyard afterward, arms crossed, the exact look on her face she gets when a spell doesn't add up. "You threw that," she says, not a question. "I lost," I say. "There's a difference." "Your footwork was perfect until the exact moment it wasn't. People don't accidentally forget how to fight." She studies me another second, deciding whether to push further. Then she just shakes her head and walks off. Everyone at this academy is hiding something. I don't have time to solve yours, too. I should have felt relieved. Instead, it told me the mask was thinner than I thought, and I was the only one who hadn't noticed yet. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 3 weeks ago, during the binding rite, the ceremony where the academy re-verifies every student's affinity for their second-year records, my chain ward flickered. Just once. Half a second of black light before it clamped back down. Instructor Bramwell Sorn saw it. He's the only staff member who's ever looked at me like I was a person and not a scholarship statistic, and that day he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't report me. He pulled me into his office instead and said 4 words that changed everything. "You're a warden's child." I had no idea what that meant. He wouldn't explain it fully, not that day, just enough to make my stomach drop. 60 years ago, the Ashfall betrayal wasn't a massacre committed by Dark Mages. It was a cover story. The real event was an order of Dark Mage Knights called the Umbral Wardens, sacrificing themselves to seal something called the Hollow, an entity that had already devoured one border province whole. The luminant Concord rewrote it, turned the Wardens into villains, turned dark affinity into a crime, and used the fear to seize control of every kingdom on the continent. Bramwell said my bloodline runs straight back to the last Warden captain. Great, just great. So now I'm not just hiding a crime, I'm hiding a conspiracy. Before I can tell him he's insane, he pulls a small black shard from a locked drawer, no bigger than a coin, and sets it on the desk between us. The moment my hand gets close to it, it hums, faint and low, like it recognizes something in my blood. "Warden relics only react to Warden blood," Bramwell says quietly. "I've kept this for 30 years waiting to see it do that." I pull my hand back like the thing bit me. "Where did you even get this?" "Recovered from the ruins of Ashwatch Hollow, the border province the Concord claims Dark Mages destroyed. I was young. I saw what was actually still standing there. It wasn't a massacre site. It was a battlefield, and half of it was still glowing gold. That's the first time in my life anyone has told me my bloodline might mean something other than a death sentence. It doesn't feel like relief. It feels like a bigger, sharper kind of danger. The kind you can't dial down. I told him to forget it. He said the Concord already suspected something and had assigned a new overseer to Aldermoor. A Grand Inquisitor, Varric Hallow. That name alone made half the staff go quiet in the hallways for a week. I kept my head down harder than ever after that. Showed up, dialed down, went home to the tiny room I shared with Mira above the blacksmith shop. Said nothing. Then came the exhibition duel against Cassian, the one they hold every year to crown the strongest first years in front of the entire noble class and half the capital's press. I didn't want to fight him. I had no choice. Refusal was an automatic failing mark, and a failing mark meant losing my scholarship, and losing my scholarship meant Mira's ring was sold for nothing. 2 days before the duel, a minor noble named Delric Voss corners me outside the armory. He's the kind who inherited a title, but not enough talent to matter, and he's spent the whole term losing to people ranked below him. "I know you're not really 11th, he says, low enough that no one else hears. "I've watched you fight. Nobody who moves like that loses by accident." He doesn't know the real reason. He just smells an angle. "Throw the exhibition duel loud enough that I look good standing next to you, and I forget what I've noticed." I could end him in 4 seconds, and we both know it. Instead, I say nothing, because saying nothing is safer than saying no, and he takes my silence as a yes. Delric has no idea how close he just came to finding out what I actually am. Neither do I. Yet. That comes 2 days later, in front of 3,000 people, when Cassian breaks the rules before I ever get the chance to fake losing to anyone. So I stepped into the arena planning to lose politely in front of 3,000 people. Cassian had other plans. He didn't want a clean loss from me. He wanted a broken one. First exchange, he used a forbidden binding technique, illegal in exhibition matches, meant to crush my mana core instead of just winning the point. He wanted me hospitalized, publicly, so nobody would ever compare our rankings again. That's when my chain ward cracked under the pressure of blocking it. Not from me pushing out, from him pushing in, and that's the moment we started with. Black mana in the open air, 3,000 witnesses. A golden blade 1 inch from my throat. "Explain," Cassian says, voice shaking. "Right now." I don't answer, because right then, 6 armored Concord inspectors step out from the private box above the arena, and one of them is wearing the black and silver sash of a Grand Inquisitor. Varric Hollow has been in the audience this entire time. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. He raises one hand and the entire arena's ambient wards snap into a containment lattice, sealing every exit, freezing every student in their seats like insects in glass. "Bring me the Nightbrand," he says. That's the word they use for us. Nightbrand. Like a stain instead of a person. Ilara is on her feet in the stands, staring at me, and for the first time in 2 years, she isn't looking at me like a nobody who got lucky. She's looking at me like she's trying to solve a puzzle she just realized has been sitting in her class the whole time. Bramwell moves first. He steps between me and the inspectors before I can even process what's happening, and he says the words that put a target directly on his own back. He's under my sponsorship. Any inquiry goes through me. Hollow smiles, and it is the coldest thing I have ever seen a human face do. "Then your sponsorship is now part of the inquiry, instructor." 2 inspectors grab Bramwell's arms. He doesn't fight it, which somehow scares me more than if he had. Cassian finally lowers his blade, and for once in his life, he looks like he has no idea what to say. I have exactly one option that doesn't end with both of us in a Concord cell by nightfall. I use it. I let the rest of the chain ward shatter on purpose. Black mana floods out of me like a dam breaking, and every ward lattice line in the arena flickers under the pressure. Hollow's smile drops for exactly 1 second before it locks back into place. "Interesting," he says. "A live one." I don't fight the inspectors holding Bramwell. I do something dumber. I offer myself as the trade. "Release him. I'll go through processing peacefully. No struggle." Hallow studies me for a long moment, the kind of look a collector gives a rare specimen, and then he says something I did not expect. "No, I don't want you processed. I want you tested, properly, tonight, in the East Wing Arena, against a combatant of my choosing. If you survive, we discuss your classification. If you don't, well, problem solved either way." That's not mercy. That's entertainment with paperwork attached. I say yes anyway, because it buys Bramwell his freedom and buys me hours instead of minutes. Word spreads through Aldermoor faster than fire through dry grass. By the time I make it back to my dorm to change, half the noble houses already know a Nightbrand scholarship student is fighting a Concord-selected combatant tonight for his life, live, in front of anyone who wants tickets. Mira finds out before I can even send word. She shows up at my dorm door white as bone, and the first thing she does is grab my face in both hands like she's checking I'm still real. They know, she says. It's not a question. They know, I confirm. Hallow's letting me fight instead of processing me, tonight. Her hands are shaking. 6 years of hiding, undone in one exhibition match neither of us saw coming. She doesn't cry, which is worse than if she had, because Mira only goes quiet like this when she's already 3 steps ahead, calculating how bad it's about to get. Whoever he sends, she says, will not be a fair fight. Hallow doesn't do fair. She's right. I find out exactly how right 2 hours later when the East Wing Arena floor opens and my opponent walks out. It's not a student. It's not a knight. It's a Concord Black Cloak enforcer named Doran Ashvale, undefeated in 11 sanctioned duels, famous specifically for one thing. He's killed 2 Dark Affinity prisoners in testing duels before, and both were ruled accidental. Ilara is in the crowd again, front row this time, and Cassian is sitting 1 seat over from her, arms crossed, jaw tight, watching me like he still hasn't decided whether he wants me to win or lose. Doran doesn't wait for a formal start. He opens with a full-force strike meant to end things in the first 10 seconds, exactly like Cassian did, except Doran isn't holding back to preserve appearances. He wants me dead and he wants it fast. I move without thinking. My body remembers 6 years of secretly training past midnight in the tunnels under the blacksmith shop, drilling techniques Mira taught me from a cracked old grimoire she never explained where she got. Umbral Severance, a blade strike wrapped in dark mana dense enough to cut through solid wardstone. I catch his strike an inch from my chest and turn it aside. The shock of the block cracks the arena floor in a 6-foot radius. Doran actually laughs. So the leash really is off. It was never really on, I say. I just kept it quiet. He comes again, faster, and this time I use Void Step, a short burst of dark mana that lets me displace a few feet instantly, gone from where he expects me to be and already behind him before he resets his stance. I land a strike across his back that should have ended the match. It doesn't. His cloak flares with a defensive rune I've never seen before, absorbing most of the hit, and he turns with a grin that tells me this fight was never about testing my strength. Hollow doesn't want you dead yet, Doran says. He wants to know exactly how strong a Warden bloodline gets before it's controllable. Congratulations, you're the experiment. That single sentence changes everything. This was never a death match. It's a data collection exercise with my life as the variable, and the only way it ends is if I show them enough to be useful or hide enough to be discarded, and either one gets Mira and me killed eventually. Doran doesn't wait for me to process that. He snaps his fingers, and the arena floor beneath me erupts into 3 spikes of compressed light, a Concord suppression trap built directly into the stone, designed specifically to ground dark mana on contact. I throw myself sideways a half-second too late, and 1 spike catches my calf, burning through muscle like acid. Pain like that should slow anyone down. It slows me down for exactly 1 second, long enough for Doran to close the distance and drive a binding rune straight into my chest. It should have locked my mana solid. Instead, the black mana pushes back against it, hard enough to crack the rune before it fully seats. Doran's eyes widen, just slightly, the first real crack in his composure all night. That shouldn't be possible at your age, he mutters. Nobody keeps telling me what's possible, I say, and drive my palm into the cracked rune before it can reform. The blowback throws both of us apart, and for a second the whole arena is lit gold and black at once, light ward and dark mana colliding in the open air like 2 storms that were never supposed to touch. I'm on 1 knee, calf still burning, blood in my mouth. Doran's back on his feet faster than I expect, already resetting for another pass. So I make a decision Bramwell would probably scream at me for. I stop holding back completely. Dusk flare erupts from both palms, black fire that doesn't burn skin so much as unmake whatever it touches, and for the first time in my life, I let every layer I've buried since childhood come out at once. The arena goes white hot with reaction wards trying to contain the output and failing. Doran's smile finally cracks. He throws everything he has left, a Concord issue binding chain meant to physically restrain a rogue mage mid-cast, and it wraps around my arm exactly the way it's supposed to. Except my mana isn't rogue, it's directed. I don't fight the chain, I redirect it, feeding Umbral Severance straight down the metal links until the entire chain shatters from the inside, and the backlash throws Doran clean across the arena into the containment wall. He doesn't get up. Dead silence again. Then Alara stands up first, alone, in front of the entire crowd, and starts clapping. Slowly. Deliberately. Like she's daring anyone else to say something about it. Nobody does. Hallow steps onto the arena floor himself now, unhurried, and claps twice, mockingly slow, the exact opposite of Alara's. Warden grade output confirmed, he says, like he's reading a report instead of watching a person nearly die. Better than the last one we tested. Much better. Last one. 2 words that tell me Doran wasn't the first experiment, and I definitely wasn't the second Nightbrand the Concord has done this to. There won't be a next time, I say. Hallow smiles that same collector's smile. There's always a next time. The question is whether you're a specimen or a soldier when it happens. I'd start deciding now, Warden's child, because the Concord Council convenes in 11 days to formally classify you. And I promise you, classification is not a conversation. It's a sentence. He turns and walks out without another word, inspectors falling in behind him, leaving 3,000 students staring at a scholarship kid who just leveled a Concord enforcer with magic that was supposed to be extinct. Ren finds me in the corridor outside the arena, the first person to reach me who isn't Cassian or a Concord inspector. He doesn't say anything about the fight, or the black mana, or any of it. He just says, quiet and a little embarrassed, I should have said something when Cassian did that to me. I didn't. I'm sorry I didn't do it for you either, until now. It's such a small thing to say after everything that just happened, and it still nearly wrecks me more than Doran's binding chain did. You don't owe me an apology, I tell him. We were both just trying to survive the same place. He nods, doesn't argue, and disappears back into the crowd before anyone important notices him standing near a Nightbrand. That's the smart move. I don't blame him for making it. Outside the arena, Capitol Press criers are already shouting the story into the streets before I've even changed out of my torn uniform. A Nightbrand scholarship student, a dead-even fight against a Concord enforcer. Words like threat and abomination get thrown around by people who weren't even in the building. I catch one crier mid-shout through a window. Concord confirms surviving Warden bloodline detained at Aldermoor Academy. Classification hearing to determine threat level. Detained. Mira isn't even taken yet, and they're already calling it settled, like the outcome was decided before the ink dried. That's the moment I understand this was never going to stay contained to one arena, one academy, one afternoon. Hollow didn't need to win tonight. He just needed witnesses. And now he has 3,000 of them, plus every printing press in the capital. Delric finds his way to the exit too, though he doesn't get close enough to talk. He's pale, staring at the cracked stone where Doran went down, and when our eyes meet, he doesn't say a word about matches or angles or looking good next to me anymore. He just nods once, stiff and short, and disappears into the crowd faster than Ren did. Whatever leverage Delric thought he had over me 2 days ago just evaporated. Now I'm the one people are afraid of, not the other way around. And I don't know yet whether that's better or worse for me. Cassian finds me before I even leave the arena floor. I brace for another attack. Instead, he just stands there, blade sheathed, staring at the cracked stone where Doran went down. You could have ended our duel earlier today, he says. Any point in the first exchange, you didn't. I was trying not to die today. Yours was the easy version. He doesn't respond to that right away. When he finally does, it's not the arrogant tone I'm used to. 11 days, he says quietly. My father sits on that council. That's when I understand the shape of the next problem before he even says it out loud. You're telling me this because he already has his verdict written. He wrote it the moment your chain ward cracked in the arena this afternoon, before you ever fought Doran. Cassian looks at me for a long, unreadable second. I don't know what I think about you yet, Draeger, but I know a rigged verdict when I see one, and I don't like watching a fixed match, even when it isn't mine. Why do you care? I ask. 6 months ago, you would have applauded a rigged verdict, as long as it wasn't yours. Something flickers across his face, gone before I can name it. 6 months ago, I hadn't watched a Concord officer try to kill a fellow student in a sanctioned duel over a technicality. There's a difference between winning and cheating, Draeger. I don't forget which one I just watched. He walks off before I can ask what that's supposed to mean, and I'm left standing in the wreckage of an arena with 11 days on a clock I didn't know existed this morning, a mentor detained for sponsoring a night brand, a guardian who just found out her worst fear came true in front of half the kingdom, and a grand inquisitor who just called me a specimen to my face. A Varel household courier finds me before I reach the East Wing doors, delivering a sealed letter stamped with House Varel's crest, addressed directly to me. I've never received anything from a noble house in my life. Inside, in handwriting too precise to belong to anyone but a man used to being obeyed, it reads, "Whatever my son believes he witnessed tonight, the council's verdict was decided before you ever stepped into that arena. I would advise against mistaking sympathy for safety. Lord Ambrose Varel." Cassian's own father, warning me off before I've even asked anyone for help. That's not a threat. That's a man telling me exactly how much power he thinks he already has over the outcome, and daring me to prove him wrong. I fold the letter once and put it in my pocket instead of tearing it up, because a threat on paper is still evidence, and evidence might matter later, even if I don't know how yet. I walk out of the East Wing expecting the worst part of the day to be over. It isn't. Mira is waiting at the arena gates, except she isn't alone. 2 Concord agents flank her, and the moment I get close enough to see her face, I already know what's about to happen. "Ronan Draeger," one of the agents says, stepping forward with a writ in hand. "By order of Grand Inquisitor Hallow, the woman who unlawfully harbored a Dark Affinity minor for 6 years is remanded into Concord custody, pending the council's classification hearing." Mira doesn't fight them. She just looks at me. And in that look is 6 years of stolen wagons and sold wedding rings and midnight training and every lie she told to keep me breathing, and she says the only thing she has time to say before they take her. "Don't you dare turn yourself in for me. Whatever they offer, whatever they threaten, you survive this, Ronan. That was always the deal." They lead her away, and I stand there with black mana still humming under my skin, completely unleashed for the first time in my life, powerful enough to level an undefeated Concord enforcer, and utterly unable to stop 2 guards from walking off with the only family I have left. Bramwell finds me minutes later, released for now but clearly not free, 2 inspectors watching him from across the courtyard. He doesn't try to comfort me. He just presses something small and cold into my palm, the same black shard from his office, and closes my fingers around it before anyone can see the exchange. "Ashwatch Hollow," he says, fast and low. "If this ever gets warm on its own, without you touching it, that means the seal out there is failing again. Find me the moment that happens, day or night. Don't tell anyone else you have it, not Alara, not Cassian." Not yet. Before I can ask what failing again even means, an inspector calls his name, and he walks off without looking back, leaving me standing in the courtyard with a relic that reacts to my blood, a mentor who just told me a 60-year-old catastrophe might not be as finished as everyone believes, and no idea which threat I'm supposed to be afraid of first. 11 days until the council decides whether I'm a specimen or a corpse. 10 if Hallow gets impatient. And somewhere in this academy, a boy who spent 2 years trying to humiliate me just became the only noble on my side, for reasons I don't understand yet and don't have time to question. In my pocket, wrapped next to Lord Varel's warning, the black shard Bramwell gave me sits colder than a stone should. For now. I don't know yet how soon that changes, or how much of what's coming depends on it. I just know Mira told me to survive, and surviving already feels like the smallest problem I have left. They don't take her through the main gate. They take her east, toward a squat gray building tucked against the academy wall that I've walked past 100 times without ever really looking at it, because nobody looks at it. Nobody's supposed to. I move before I decide to, 3 steps, maybe 4, before a ward barrier snaps up in front of me like a wall of glass I never saw coming. The impact throws me back onto the stone, not the black mana reacting, the ward itself, keyed against anyone the Concord hasn't cleared. Aldermoor Annex is Concord property, the escort guard says, not even looking back. Family visitation is a courtesy. Right now, you don't have one. There's a man near the annex gate I don't recognize. Plain clothes, no Concord sash, holding a slate and writing something down every few seconds, without ever looking up at what he's supposedly recording. Press. Already here. Already working. I don't know yet what he's documenting. Only that whatever it is, it started before Mira even reached the door. He glances at me once. Just once. The way you'd glance at a piece of scenery worth remembering later. And then goes back to his slate like I already stopped mattering to whatever story he's building. Great. Just great. 6 hours since a bracelet cracked in an arena, and I've already lost the ability to walk toward my own sister. I try anyway. I tell the guard I'll sign whatever needs signing, submit to whatever inspection the Concord wants, if he'll just let me see her for 1 minute. He almost laughs. You misunderstand your position, Draeger. Nobody's negotiating with the exhibit. Exhibit. Not girl. Not prisoner, even. The word slips out sideways, like something he's already been told to say in a different context, and he catches it half a second too late to take it back. His eyes flick toward the pressman by the gate, checking whether it landed on anyone holding a slate. It didn't. Small mercy. But I heard it, and now I can't stop hearing it. No windows on that building. I never noticed that before either. I stand there long after the door swallows her, long after the courtyard empties out around me, until it's just me, a cracked ward line still humming where I hit it, and the shard in my pocket doing absolutely nothing. Still cold, still just a rock. For now. For now feels like the cruelest 2 words in this entire day. I don't remember walking back to my dorm. I remember the door shutting behind me, and I remember sitting on the edge of my bed still in my torn duel uniform, staring at a wall I've stared at every night for 2 years without it ever once looking like a countdown before. 10 days. Maybe fewer if Hallow decides patience is a weakness. I don't sleep. I lie there running the math on people I have left. Mira behind a door I can't open. Bramwell, somewhere in Concord custody for the crime of telling the truth about me. Cassian, a rigged verdict and a father's letter in my pocket. Motives I still can't read. Ilara, a question mark I don't have time to solve. That's 4 people orbiting my life right now, and exactly none of them are safe because of me. Morning comes anyway, the way it always does, indifferent to whether you slept. I go to class because staying in my room looks like guilt, and looking guilty is one more thing Hallow doesn't need handed to him for free. Tactics lecture. Half the room won't look at me, the other half won't stop. Renna runs us through paired sparring drills anyway, like normal lessons are still a thing that happens today, and pairs me against a 3rd year I've never spoken to before. He won't meet my eyes when we bow to start. His hands shake on his practice blade the entire match, and it has nothing to do with technique. I hold back so hard my jaw aches from clenching it, because the last thing I need today is another headline about the Nightbrand who couldn't control himself in a classroom. I lose on purpose again, the same old habit, except now everyone in the room knows exactly why I'm capable of doing more, and exactly why I'm choosing not to. Cassian watches the whole thing from across the hall without saying a word, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I don't know yet that he's already decided something by the time the drill ends. I find out a few hours later, in a chapel, holding a stolen letter. Instructor Rena calls the roll like nothing happened, skips straight past Bramwell's name without explanation, and that gap where his voice should be says more than any announcement could. Between lectures, the corridor outside the East Hall has a new notice pinned to the board, where exam schedules usually go. No Concord seal on it, which somehow makes it worse, because that means someone printed it privately and nobody's bothered to take it down. 3 lines, blunt as a slap. A reminder that unregistered dark affinity individuals endanger every household they enter. A reminder that vigilance protects the kingdom. No names? It doesn't need names. Half the students reading it already glance my way before they finish the second line. A pair of third years I don't know go quiet the second I pass, then start talking again the moment they think I'm out of earshot. I catch one word clearly, Nightbrand, said the way you'd say vermin. Ren finds me between classes, quick, like he's timed it to avoid an audience. He doesn't ask about Mira, he doesn't ask about the arena, he just falls into step beside me for exactly the length of one empty corridor. People are saying things, he says. Wanted you to hear it from someone who isn't saying them. Thanks, I say, and mean it more than the word carries. Whatever's coming, Ren says, I'm not going anywhere. Figured that's worth something, even if it's not much. He peels off before the corridor ends, back into the crowd, careful again, and I don't blame him for that either. Being seen with me right now is its own kind of risk, and he's already paid for standing near a Nightbrand once. 2 corridors down, I watch a younger student get shoved into a wall by an upperclassman for wearing a dark blue scarf the wrong way, the kind of scarf that apparently now reads as sympathy to some people. The kid hadn't done anything except exist near me for half a second in the dining hall yesterday. Nobody stops it. I don't stop it either, because stopping it means becoming the center of another scene, and I'm already the center of too many. Delric finds me once more before midday, quieter than he's ever been around me. He doesn't try to blackmail anyone this time. He just says, low and fast, that his father's already forbidden him from being seen anywhere near me until this Nightbrand business resolves itself, and that he's sorry, and that sorry doesn't cost him anything, so he figures it's the least he can offer. Then he's gone before I can decide whether to be angry or grateful. Small mercies today apparently come with disclaimers attached. Midday, the entire academy gets summoned to the central courtyard without warning. 3 chimes instead of the usual 1, the signal reserved for announcements that don't wait. Grand Inquisitor Hollow stands on the dueling platform where Cassian and I fought less than a day ago, like he already owns the ground it's built on. He doesn't shout, same as before, he doesn't need to. Aldermoor Academy trained a monster in secret for 2 years, he says, voice carrying easily across 3,000 silent students. That failure belongs to no single person here. It belongs to a system too comfortable to ask hard questions about the people it educates. I intend to ensure that comfort ends, for everyone's protection, starting with full transparency about what this academy has been hiding. Every head in the courtyard turns toward me at once, 3,000 of them, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to disappear into stone. Justice will be visible, Hallow says, and something about the word visible already sits wrong in my chest, like a held breath before a blow that hasn't landed yet. The kingdom deserves to see resolve, not paperwork. He steps down without taking questions, without another word, leaving 3,000 students to stare at me like I'm already standing trial in the middle of the courtyard. I make it through exactly 1 class before a folded page finds its way into my hand between corridors. No seal, no signature, just 6 words in handwriting I already know. Old Chapel, after dusk, come alone. Bramwell's handwriting, which means Bramwell's out. That single detail rearranges everything. Concord custody doesn't release people quietly, especially not people it just detained for harboring a Nightbrand in front of 3,000 witnesses. Someone with real weight had to make a call, And I already have a guess who, because I'm still carrying his letter. The day drags in a way it's never dragged before. Every hour between that note and dusk feels like standing still while a clock somewhere keeps moving without me. I spend the space between afternoon and dusk doing the only useful thing available to me, which is watching. I circle wide past the annex twice, careful to stay outside the ward line, and both times there are more people near that gate than there were that morning. Carpenters this time, measuring open ground near the annex wall, marking it with chalk lines I don't understand yet, and don't like the look of anyway. By the third pass, a herald's already pinning fresh notices to the market boards 2 streets over, the same 3 blunt lines from the corridor board this morning, except now stamped with an official Concord seal and a printed date. Word travels fast when the people spreading it want it to. The old chapel sits at the edge of Aldermoor's grounds, deconsecrated decades ago, used now for storage and nothing else. Bramwell's waiting inside when I get there, alone, a single lantern throwing his shadow twice his actual size against a wall of broken pews. He doesn't look like a man who spent the day in a Concord cell. He looks like a man who spent the day deciding how much truth he can afford to give me. "You're out," I say. "How?" Lord Ambrose Varel walked into a closed-door council session this morning and vouched for my conduct personally. Bramwell's voice is flat, careful, the tone of someone still turning a fact over looking for the trap in it. I've taught at this academy 11 years. I have never once spoken to that man directly. "He sent me a letter last night," I say. "Warned me off expecting help. Told me the verdict was already written." Bramwell's jaw tightens. "Then he's not protecting you. He's controlling the pace." A detained instructor and a dead scholarship student both draw the wrong kind of attention this early. He needs this quiet a little longer. That's not mercy, Ronan. That's stagecraft. Hearing my own name said like that, careful and grim, lands harder than it should. "So what changes in 10 days, I ask, besides everyone deciding I'm either a weapon or a corpse? Bramwell doesn't answer right away. Instead, he reached under his collar and pulls out a thin chain, and hanging from it is a ring, black metal gone dull with age, set with a crest I've never seen anywhere in my life. 2 crossed blades over a closed eye. "I need you to look at this before I say anything else," he says, and holds it out. The moment my fingers close around it, the ring goes warm, the exact same low hum the shard gave off in his office 3 weeks ago, except stronger. Loud enough that it feels less like a reaction and more like a greeting. "That's the Draeger line's true sigil," Bramwell says. "Not a family crest a seamstress would have any business owning. A warden captain's seal, passed down through blood since the Ashfall the Trail. I've spent 30 years trying to confirm what Mira already knew the night she pulled you out of that wagon." My mouth goes dry. "Confirm what?" "You're not just warden descended, Ronan. You're the direct line. Captain Selwyn Draeger commanded the Umbral Wardens the night they sealed the Hollow. 60 years later, this ring only answers to one bloodline left standing. Yours." For a moment, I can't say anything at all. The chapel is silent enough that I can hear the lantern flame hiss against a draft I can't feel. "How did he die?" I finally ask. "Selwyn. If he sealed something that big, how does a captain like that end up written into history as a monster instead of the man who saved it?" "He didn't die sealing the Hollow. He died 3 years after, in a Concord prison, convicted of treason he never committed." Bramwell's voice doesn't waver, but something behind his eyes does. "The wardens survived the sealing. Nearly all of them. That was the problem. Living heroes asked questions the Concord didn't want answered. About how a border province got devoured in the first place and who let it happen. Dead heroes don't ask anything. So the Concord made sure they didn't stay alive long enough to become a problem." "That's not a betrayal," I say. "That's a murder with better paperwork." "Yes," Bramwell says, simple and final. "It is." 6 words changed everything 3 weeks ago. This is worse. This isn't a possibility anymore. This is a name, a rank, a war I apparently inherited without ever being asked. Why does Mira have his ring and not me? I ask, because it's the only question I can actually get my mouth around. She doesn't have it. I do. She has something else. Something I haven't earned the right to tell you about yet, because it isn't mine to tell. Bramwell closes my fingers back around the ring. Keep this hidden better than the shard. If certain people learn there's a confirmed warden bloodline walking around with a captain's seal in his pocket, the council stops debating your classification and starts debating your execution date instead. There's another reason to be careful, Bramwell adds. Warden relics resonate with each other over distance, faintly, but they resonate. If the Concord ever recovers a second confirmed relic anywhere in the kingdom, and this ring is on you when they do, it will react whether you want it to or not. That's how they'll find you faster than any inspector's spell ever could. So the safest thing to do is give it back? I say. The safest thing to do stopped being available for you 6 hours ago, Bramwell says. Now it's just about which risks you choose. That's the kind of sentence that should terrify me more than it does. Mostly I just feel tired, in the specific way that comes from being handed one more secret to carry when you're already buckling under the last 5. 10 days, I say. That's what we've got before the council convenes. 10 days to prove your worth more contained than destroyed, Bramwell says. Fewer if Hallow finds a reason to move early. He's not a patient man, and he's already shown you he doesn't need patience when he has an audience. They wouldn't even let me near the annex, I say. No windows on that building. I keep thinking about that. Why build a holding cell with no windows unless you're planning on doing something to the person inside that you don't want anyone watching by accident? Bramwell's expression doesn't soften. Because sometimes the audience is the point, and you control it better with a door than with walls that let people see in before you're ready to let them see in. Whatever Hallow's planning for her, Ronan, it isn't private because he's ashamed of it. It's private because he hasn't finished staging it yet. That building has a history, Bramwell adds, quieter now. It's older than the Academy itself. Before Aldermoor was built around it, that annex processed the last of the surviving wardens, 60 years ago, before their trials. I only know that because it's one of the few facts that never got fully scrubbed from the property records, and even then, only because nobody thought a deed registry was worth burning. The idea of Mira standing inside the same walls that once held Selwyn Draeger's own soldiers doesn't just scare me. It feels like the story looping back on itself on purpose, like nothing about this week is an accident. That sentence sits in my chest like a second ward strike. Worse than the first one because this one doesn't leave a bruise you can see. Bramwell puts a hand on my shoulder before I go. Brief, steadying. The closest thing to comfort either of us has time for tonight. Whatever happens in the next 10 days, he says, you are not the first Draeger to carry more than one person should have to carry alone. You won't be the last either. That's not comfort, it's just true. I don't know what to say to that, so I don't say anything at all, and he lets me leave without making me try. I leave the chapel with a dead captain's seal in my pocket next to a shard that still won't warm and a letter from a man who calls silence a courtesy. 3 objects, 0 comfort. I don't get halfway back to my dorm before someone else is waiting for me, and this time it isn't a folded note. It's Alara, arms crossed, standing directly under the one working lamp on that side of the courtyard, like she wants to be seen finding me. I've been watching you for 3 weeks, she says, no greeting, straight in. Longer than that, actually. I just didn't know what I was watching until yesterday. You picked a strange week to start a conversation, I say. I picked the only week where lying to me stopped being an option. She steps closer, lowers her voice even though the courtyard's empty. I know what black mana means under Concord law. I know what it costs a person to hide it for years. What I don't know is why you're still standing here instead of running. And I want an actual answer, not whatever careful thing you're about to say instead. I don't have a careful thing ready, that's the problem. Because running gets Mira killed faster than staying does, I say. That's the whole plan. There isn't a second part. Something shifts in her expression. Something that isn't pity, which is the only reason I don't immediately regret answering honestly. My grandmother was executed under Ashfall law when I was 6, Alara says. It comes out flat, rehearsed, like she's said it exactly this way in her head 100 times, and never once out loud. She wasn't even dark affinity. She hid someone who was. That was enough. The Concord doesn't distinguish between the crime and the kindness. That lands somewhere I wasn't braced for. I've spent the last year going through sealed archive fragments on the Ashfall betrayal whenever the restricted wing rotation gives me an opening, she says. Half of it's redacted so heavily it's just black ink and page numbers. But the parts that survive don't match the story every child in this kingdom gets taught. Not even close. How do you even get access to a restricted wing, I ask. That's not exactly open to students. I copied a clerk's rotation schedule and started memorizing which nights the junior archivist works alone, Alara says, like it's the most ordinary thing in the world. I've been doing it long enough that if anyone ever checks the sign-in log properly, I'll have a great deal of explaining to do. So far, nobody's checked. There's a phrase that shows up in 3 separate fragments, in 3 different handwritings, like it survived only because nobody thought a single phrase was worth redacting, Alara says. Contained, not destroyed. Over and over. Contained, not destroyed. I never understood what it meant until about 10 seconds ago. That phrase settles into my chest like a stone dropping into still water. Contained where? I ask. I don't know yet. The location's one of the redacted parts, but whatever that thing actually was, it wasn't a story that ended 60 years ago. It's a story that's still happening, quietly, somewhere, and apparently your family is the only reason it hasn't started happening loudly. Let me guess, I say. Wardens. A sealed entity called the Hollow. A cover-up big enough to run a continent on. Alara goes very still. How do you already know that? Because I found out 3 weeks ago that I'm the last confirmed piece of it, I say, and immediately regret how much that cost me to say out loud to someone who isn't Bramwell or Mira. She doesn't flinch. If anything, something in her posture sharpens, like a puzzle just clicked into a shape she'd already half built on her own. Then you're going to need people who already know how to survive quietly inside the parts of this system that aren't rigged against you yet, Alara says. I've been surviving it for 12 years. I'm good at it. Why would you risk that for me? Because someone should have risked it for my grandmother, and nobody did. Her voice doesn't shake when she says it, which somehow makes it worse. I'm not doing this because I like you, Draeger. I'm doing it because I'm done watching the Concord get away with the same lie twice. That should feel like relief. Instead, it feels like one more name added to the list of people who can be hurt because of me. Except this one chose it with her eyes open, which is either braver or more reckless than anything Mira or Bramwell has done, and I genuinely can't decide which. Lantern light sweeps across the far end of the courtyard before either of us can say anything else. Concord patrol, 2 of them, making the kind of slow, deliberate circuit that means they're actually looking for something tonight, not just walking a habit. Alara grabs my sleeve and pulls me into the recessed doorway of the old records hall without a word, both of us pressed flat against stone that's colder than the night air. Her breathing goes shallow and even, controlled, practiced, like she's done exactly this more than once this year alone. The patrol passes 20 feet away, close enough that I hear one of them mention the annex by name, close enough that for a few seconds neither of us breathes at all. Then the lantern light swings off toward the east wall, and the footsteps fade, and Alara steps back out like nothing happened. They're patrolling harder tonight, she says, quiet, mostly to herself. That's new. That's not comforting, I say. It wasn't meant to be. Before I can ask anything else, footsteps cut the moment short again, and Cassian steps out from the shadow of the east colonnade like he'd been standing there longer than either of us realized, waiting for the patrol to clear before showing himself. Touching, Cassian says, dry, though there's no real mockery in it tonight. But you should both know the council isn't waiting quietly for 10 days, like everyone keeps assuming. Alara's whole posture changes, wary now, watching him the way you'd watch a blade you're not sure which direction it's pointing. "You've got about 90 seconds to explain why you're eavesdropping on a night brand at night," she says, before I stop being polite about it. "I'm not eavesdropping, I'm delivering." Cassian pulls a folded page from inside his jacket, the kind of parchment that only exists in noble households, sealed and then broken open already. "This came to my father's study this afternoon. I copied it before he noticed it was gone." He hands it to me. My hands are steadier than I expect them to be, which surprises me more than the paper itself. "Your father's letting you steal council correspondence now," I say. "My father doesn't know I can read his correspondence at all, which is exactly how I'd like to keep it," Cassian says. "I've spent 2 years being the son who agrees with everything he says. Turns out that's useful, right up until it isn't." "Why the sudden change of heart?" I ask, because I still don't fully believe it. Cassian's jaw tightens. "Because I watched a Concord officer try to murder a first year in a sanctioned duel, and then I watched my own father write a verdict before the trial even happened. I don't need to like you to know that's wrong." "And if he finds out you're standing here doing this," Alara says, "what happens to you?" "Disowned, probably. Maybe worse, depending on how badly this reflects on the family name by the time it's over." Cassian says it without flinching, like he's already run the calculation more than once tonight and made peace with the answer. "I'm not doing this because I've suddenly decided you're my favorite person, Draeger. I'm doing it because I'd rather lose a name than spend the rest of my life knowing I stood by and said nothing while my father used a person as a headline." Alara reads over my shoulder before I can stop her, and whatever she finds on that page drains the color out of her face fast enough that I brace myself before I've even looked down. The letter is short. Council seal at the top, Hallow's signature at the bottom, 3 lines of text in between that rearrange the entire shape of the next 10 days. Subject Draeger's guardian to be presented publicly at Aldermoor's Central Market Square, 3 days from this notice, at dusk. Purpose: to demonstrate Concord resolve regarding unregistered Dark Affinity harborers ahead of the classification hearing. Full press access to be granted. I read it twice, because the first time, my brain refuses to accept what it's looking at. "Demonstrate," I say. That's the word he used, demonstrate. "It's not a hearing," Alara says quietly. "It's a spectacle. He's not waiting for the council's verdict on you. He's building public opinion against every Dark Affinity person in the kingdom before that verdict even happens, and he's using Mira to do it." "Full press access," I say, and the words taste worse coming out of my own mouth than they did on the page. "That man I saw outside the annex tonight. Slate, no sash, writing everything down. He wasn't documenting a detention. He was already drafting the story Hallow wants printed after." 3 days, Cassian says. "Not 10, 3. "My father's faction will be seated in the front section," he adds, quieter now, like even he doesn't love saying it out loud. "It's meant to look like consensus, a united council, publicly resolved before a single vote is ever cast." "We're not letting that happen," I say, and it comes out steadier than I feel. "Agreed," Alara says, "but 3 days isn't enough time to plan something clean. We need eyes inside that annex. We need to know Hallow's exact procession route to the square, and we need a way to reach Myra before she's ever standing in front of a crowd." "I can get you the route," Cassian says. "My father's itinerary lists every council movement for the week. I've already seen tomorrow's schedule. I can get the rest." "That's not nothing," I say. "It's not much either. It's more than we had an hour ago," Alara says. 3 days. We use every hour of it." Cassian looks at me for a long moment, something unreadable behind the usual arrogance, like he's still deciding whether he trusts the plan or just trusts that there isn't a better one yet. "For what it's worth, Draeger, I didn't bring you that letter so you could sit on it. I brought it so you'd have time to actually do something. I intend to. The shard in my pocket sits exactly as cold as it did an hour ago, And for the first time since Bramwell gave it to me, that feels like the least urgent problem I'm carrying. 10 days was already a countdown I didn't know how to survive. 3 days isn't a countdown anymore. It's a deadline, and it has Mira's name written directly under Hallow's signature, in a language that only means one thing. He's not planning to wait for permission to use her. He already has it.